One of my employees one day started telling their patients that, oh yeah, we're gonna move. I was like, uh-oh. So I went down there, had to fire that doctor. They were taking the patients and moving to their own business. So I was like, listen, you're done. And remember, it's Costa Rica, basically a third world country at that time. But one day my bodyguard came to me and was like, listen, man, we have an issue because I was offered what amounts to $250 US to kill Shawn. But that was the time that The Sopranos was big. And, so it was like this whole thing, right? Like, it's like, wow, like we're in a real life gangster war here, right? Like my bodyguard was like, look, these people are trying to shoot you. I am telling you that we know who the people are that are trying to put a bullet in you. So we should probably take care of that. And I was like, no, I am not going to tell you. Because now we're engaged in The Sopranos, right? Like, so.
Welcome back to the Piece of Gryt podcast. Today, for all of my service-based entrepreneurs, we have a special one for you today. We are sitting down with Dr. Shawn Dill. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I've seen a lot of your content online, and you talk a lot about book yourself solid. We've talked to a lot of business coaches, like obviously being in the world of agencies, you kind of talk to them all day. My first question for you is, what in your mind defines a good business coach versus one of these kind of run-of-the-mill, you sit down with them, they've maybe gotten a business to like 20, 30K a month, and now they're selling you on how to do that. Like, what would you define as the good versus the bad in that space?
Well, I think there's a huge difference between coaching and mentorship. So first of all, like when you talked about maybe somebody had a business, they got it to 20 or 30K or wherever they got it to, does not mean that they're necessarily a good coach. So a lot of times people think that the criteria is that in order to be a coach, you have to have done the thing. But I want to point out that if we look at professional sports, most professional sports teams are coached by an individual who was not necessarily great as a player. And in some cases, who never played, right? Or couldn't make it at the professional level. So having done the thing is not a criteria for being a good coach. Take Bill Belichick. How do you know him as an NFL football player? Do you even know if he played in the NFL? The answer is no, right? You don't know, but he's one of the greatest coaches in football that ever coached. So the criteria to say like, listen, you have to have done the thing in order to coach, that is not true. I would then look at a track record. I would want to know, listen, if you are a coach, show me your portfolio of businesses that you've coached to 7, 8, 9 figures, because then you have a track record. What people confuse though is mentorship. And so if you were attempting to be a quarterback, you would want to have a quarterback coach who maybe never was, great as a quarterback. Even you take a look at, for example, Tiger Woods' golf coach. Tiger Woods is a better golfer than any golf coach that he's ever had. Just makes sense, right? But mentorship, and that also does not mean that Tiger Woods would be a good coach. For example, Michael Jordan attempting to be a coach, Isaiah Thomas attempting to be a coach. Larry Bird did actually pretty well as a coach, but being a great player doesn't make you a great coach. It does make you a good mentor. So mentorship is situational awareness. So if I was a quarterback and I was going to play in the Super Bowl, I would want to ask Tom Brady, who's done it multiple times, what do I need to be prepared for? What does it look like? So I think that one, let's clarify coaching and mentorship. 2, if I'm looking for a good coach, I want to look at a portfolio of who have you worked with. I would judge your clients more than I would judge you and what you've done in your business. But I also think that the best thing is to find coaching and mentorship in one, especially in business, right? So I'd want to find somebody that has a track record of being able to build other people, but has the situational awareness themselves. Lastly, I like coaches that have a system that they can base off of. That's why we utilize Book Yourself Solid, and we'll probably get into my history and story with Book Yourself Solid. But we utilize that as our foundation, but also it's not cookie cutter. So if I was coaching you, I'm not just going to walk through this thing because you might be 4 steps ahead. You might have big deficiencies in some areas. So again, situational awareness is probably one of the biggest things to look for in a coach.
What got you into the industry as a whole? Obviously, you started as a chiropractor, you scaled that, and then you transitioned into coaching. When did that start, and what was the inspiration for you to start that?
A little Book Yourself Solid creeps in a little bit here. So I'll give you the 30,000 foot view of my history. Goes back to 1995 is when I graduated as a chiropractor. So, I mean, that's a long time ago. Practiced in Costa Rica for a long while, for 8 years. Very young age, I was sort of thrown into big-sized things. I wrote the law at 24 years old. I wrote the law that regulates chiropractic in Costa Rica and lobbied for the passage of that law when I was 24. So then I was in the realm of politics and, lobbying and all of that. And the first year in practice, my practice was terrible. I mean, brutally terrible. At the end of the first year, I think I had 4 patients. I was contemplating throwing in the towel. Luckily got things turned around, had a really great run in Costa Rica, moved back to the States. So basically now starting over, and literally starting over, terrible first run, just absolutely dead broke. I found this book, Book Yourself Solid, read the book. And then literally that becomes the launch point for everything that we did. That Michael Port, who's the author, was my very first coach. He helped me to get things back turned around here in the United States. We then opened up a chiropractic office. So that the 30,000 foot view is important because I practice a type of chiropractic that's called upper cervical specific chiropractic. We focus only on the top 2 bones. We don't adjust the patient on every visit. There is one here in Naples, our franchise. We have one here, Dr. Mike Muller. It's all cash based. I don't know anything about the insurance or third party world. So basically those offices are Costa Rica offices brought to the United States. So people found this interesting. They were like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And I was like, well, I don't know. This is all I know. Some people were like, well, I don't want to practice that super unique approach to chiropractic, but can you help me? That's what started then the coaching, because I was like, look, if you were in my franchise, then I would obviously be coaching you and helping you. But if you don't want to do that, I have to figure out a way that I could service these people. And so I started coaching. We started doing that. And then one of the things that happened, and fast forward is still 30,000 foot view, is I realized I was only helping chiropractors. And one of the things that I love is taking things that work in one industry and applying it to other industries. Drive-through. When I say drive-through, you guys probably think of like fast food. But the drive-through concept originated in banks. So banks were doing the drive-through concept. They used to have these little vacuum tubes and they would shoot these, the money over to the cars, right? And so the restaurants saw that and they were like, how could we do that to create efficiency? And so that's a great example of somebody taking a banking concept and putting it into food and beverage. And so all of these things can be applied. You look at what's working for lawyers, you look at what's working for mortgage brokers, and then you apply them across. What works for dentists and how are they, they're doing the free teeth whitening. Well, what does that mean in the real estate world? So I became really interested in that, and we began to diversify, go into Black Diamond Club. Then eventually we acquire Book Yourself Solid, and now we've put them both together into something called the Adaptable Entrepreneur.
That's really cool. So when you were in Costa Rica, that's super interesting because that's a whole nother like wellness space, especially now. One of our partners lives out in, where in Costa Rica, small town in Costa Rica, but it's like a blue zone basically. What was it like living there, understanding the way that they operate in terms of just their day to day versus somewhere like Indianapolis, Naples, things like that?
Well, first and foremost, when I went to Costa Rica, I didn't speak Spanish, which is a very stereotypical gringo, like, dude, everybody speaks English, right? Like, and they don't. I did a teaching once too, as a side, in Japan, and in the sticks of Japan. And we were having team was having a full conversation with these people that brought me over. And when I got there, they didn't speak a lick of English. And I was like, hey man, like how come nobody knew that they didn't speak any English? And what I figured out is they were using Google Translate, and they were having text or message conversations, full conversations with Google Translate. Google Translate didn't exist in 1995 when I went there. That was one of the reasons why year one was brutal. Like, imagine doing a thing, even here in the United States, when I say we practice chiropractic and we only adjust the top 2 bones of the neck and we don't adjust on every visit, both of you kind of made this like, face. So that requires some explanation. Imagine that I couldn't speak English. That I was like, so you're like, that's interesting. Tell us more. And I was like, bones bad, fix me. And you're like, wait, what? So it was very difficult. But the other thing that I love about the Latin culture, I have 2 daughters. They're both born in Costa Rica. I love the Latin culture because very family centered. So once you had one person coming in, you were automatically going to have the whole family coming in. And in the extended family, it was easy to grow a business there. And they're very natural oriented, right? They're not trying to find a pill, potion, and lotion for everything that ails them. They're more accepting of this idea that the body can heal itself. Once I figured out communication, my practice boomed. We charged about $10 to $12, and with the conversion, about $10 per visit. I saw on average 250 patient visits per day by myself, 5.5 days a week. So I was super cash flush. I lived like a king in Costa Rica. It was fantastic. I absolutely love the Latin lifestyle. I would love to one day, I've never been, I would love to go to Colombia. I think I would love Colombia. I would one day, I think I would move there, I think. By the way, I moved to Naples having never been here.
Really?
I bought my place in Naples off the internet.
Damn.
When did you move to Naples?
About 4 years ago, right before COVID.
Oh, wow. So right before that real estate boom too. So you're doing pretty all right there.
People think I'm a genius, but I have to confess on your podcast, it was just pure dumb luck. I was looking on the internet. I was like, let's go to Naples. We'll buy this place. The worst thing that could happen if we hate Naples is we'll just sell it. I don't think it'll lose value, and it didn't. And we bought the place off the internet, and I came down here, and I remember meeting the sales guy, and I was like, what do people do in Naples? And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like for fun, like, what should we do today? And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, we just got here and we've never been to Naples. And he was like, but you just bought this place. And I was like, right, but I don't know what to do. I didn't know seed to take. I didn't know anything. They were like, what is wrong with you? And it worked out fantastic. And actually we loved Naples, but that I would go to Colombia if I could find a place on the internet.
So you're in Costa Rica. You worked so hard. You went through school. You opened your practice, and the first year goes horribly. Where's your mindset at, and what made you not throw in the towel?
Man, my mindset was I should throw in the towel. I was just thinking like I need a break. I need to catch a break, and I caught a break. This is another really great story. I was invited to go on a TV show, and it was like it would basically be the equivalent of like Good Morning America or the Today Show. It was the national morning show. And I was like, yeah, this will be great. This is the break that I needed. So I hired a guy because my Spanish wasn't great. And I hired a guy and I was like, look, this isn't rocket science. There's a series of things that they could ask me, right? They're going to ask me like, what is chiropractic? What is it good for? And let's rehearse the answers and let me make sure that I can say them perfectly in Spanish. And so he helped me. We craft the answers. And I went on, and the lady, the host, she looked at me and she said, you know, Shawn, you look a little Asian. What is the difference between chiropractic and acupuncture? That was the first question. And I hadn't practiced that. I could understand Spanish. So I knew she asked me that, but I was like, I don't know how to answer that in Spanish. So I just said my rehearsed answers. So now the whole interview, the questions and the answers don't match. Like not even like I was transitioning to that's a great question, but first let me tell you, I didn't know how to do that. So I was just like, she'd ask something and I would just answer what I wanted to answer. And she's looking at me, and even then it wasn't very good. And she's looking at me like, what the heck? So I get off that set and I was like, that was a bust, like an absolute bust. Now I probably should go home. And they called and they were like, yeah, hey, listen, we want to invite you back. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, we want to, have you come back next month on the show. And so that was one of the things that I was like, okay, like maybe I'll make it. I ended up being on that show every month from there until I left Costa Rica. And that's literally what built my practice, was going on television and sharing that message. When I was leaving, we had this like big going away party, and she was there. And she asked me, she said, do you remember coming on the show the first time? I was like, heck yeah, I remember. It was terrible. And I think this is good for understanding the context of your show. I think this is really good for all of your listeners. I said, I was terrible. Why did you invite me back? And she said, yeah, it was really weird. Like I literally didn't understand anything that you said. And then when you walked off the set, I looked at our producer and I said, get him back. And my producer was like, what? That was terrible. And she said, yes, get him back, because I can tell in his eyes that he has a message to tell. And we are going to invite him back until he gets it right. Like, we want to know what that message is. He has something that he's trying to say. He's very passionate about it. He just doesn't know how to say it yet. So keep inviting him back. And this is not like some, I have a podcast. It's not a podcast.
Yeah.
This was a national television show. And she was like, keep bringing back the guy that can't really articulate himself. Keep putting him back on our show until he gets it right. Because when he gets it right, I have a feeling that it's really going to be impactful. And so that was sort of my lucky break. I didn't know that. They didn't tell me that, but they called back and they were like, come back on the show. So I was like, wow, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. And it turns out it was, but I was invited back. And so thankfully I just stuck around, which is that grit, right? I was like, all right, I'm going to do it again. I think too, like when it comes to like doing a podcast, doing social media, doing a television show, a radio interview, it's going to be bad the first time you do it. And that's totally fine. I always tell people too, like, other than her, I've never met anybody that says to me, like, I saw you when you first did it and you were terrible, other than her. So I'm sure people watched it, but it's gone from their memory. Nobody has ever told me. People have told me later, like, oh, I love watching you on the show. So all of our bad content, that just gets washed out in people's memory. Like, don't even worry about it. There's tons of bad Gary V content. There's tons of bad, whoever you look up to, it's out there, but we just don't store that in our memory banks. And so for everybody that's watching, just do it. Just go and do it and keep pressing, and eventually it'll get good.
That's so cool that they read your energy like that, where they could just tell on a show where the language barrier was so tough, but they felt your energy for your passion for what you were trying to do. I'd be interested, when you do that, like, what inspired you wanting to go back to the States when you're ripping like that?
Oh, so I was ripping like that. And I had multiple businesses. I was the distributor for Glock firearms in Costa Rica. I owned a sports bar. I owned a security company. I've always been an entrepreneur. So I was just doing entrepreneur type things. And one of my employees one day as a chiropractor, started telling their patients that, oh yeah, we're going to move. We're moving down the street. And so the front desk person called me and they were like, hey, are we moving? And I was like, no, what's going on? They're like, well, the doctor's saying that we're moving next week down the street. And I was like, uh-oh. So I went down there, had to fire that doctor. They were taking the patients and moving to their own business. So I was like, listen, you're done. Well, they did open their own business and the business didn't go as they had wanted it to. And remember, it's Costa Rica. So this is basically a third world country at that time, still is, but it's really a third world country. And I also had a security company. So we provided security for major businesses. We also provided security at a lot of large sporting events. And of course, with any degree of success, you have a bodyguard. That's not a flex. You don't need a lot of money in Costa Rica to necessitate a bodyguard. Like, look at Man on Fire. Especially if you have kids, you need to have protection. Well, one day my bodyguard came to me and was like, listen, man, we have an issue because do you remember so-and-so who used to work for us in security? I ran into him this weekend and he sat me down and he was like, I want to just let you know that I was approached by these two individuals and I was offered what amounts to $250 to kill Shawn. And so there's been a hit that's been put out on you. And that guy just wanted us to know that he said no. But my bodyguard was like, so now we know that that's out there. And shortly after that, there was a gunfire at my house. We had armed guards at our house. And so I just, in the gunfire, they had shot not into, but the bullets had hit houses that are made out of cinder block, had hit the wall where my daughter's bedroom was. And so immediately the next day, I just sent them to the States and we moved. So it was a very abrupt, listen, that was a time, and you guys are young, but that was a time that The Sopranos was big. And, so it was like this whole thing, right? Like, it's like, wow, like we're in a real life gangster war here, right? Like, it's a very difficult thing. Like, if you really think about it, because my bodyguard was like, look, these people are trying to shoot you. They're trying to kill you. My job as your bodyguard is to be between you and any bullet that's intended for you. I am telling you that we know who the people are that are trying to put a bullet in you. So we should probably take care of that. And then just silence, right? And I was like, no, I'm not going to tell you because now we're engaged in the Sopranos, right?
That's
Like,
insane.
so I was like, I would just leave. Like, I'll just go back to the States. And so that was one of the things, my abrupt departure. Basically, it was like a liquidation sale. So I came back to the States with very little. And that was basically a full starting over process for me because of the way that I left.
Was there a moment that you considered it?
Well, you always consider that, right? But like then you think about like then the chain of events. So if I'm like, yeah, take care of, then that guy's got parents and sons and daughters. There's someone else that's like, okay, so now we're coming back for you. And what if we make it through? I was like, it never ends. Now that this has started, there is no ending point. I mean, and I love Man on Fire. I love Narcos. I because I live that. It's all true. It's all very true. But if you look at like Narcos, it never ends. Like there's no, eventually you are gone. And then it's like the next people are kind of up and coming.
Did you ever find out who took the hit out on you?
Oh yes, we know who took the, we, that was why. That was the big difference, right? Because my bodyguard was like, we know who it is. Like I'm telling you, it's this person. Maybe we should do something about that person. And I was like, no, this is crazy.
Was it because of the chiropractor business or something?
It was, yes, that's their business. There were two partners who had both worked for me in the past, and they broke off and their business was not doing as well as they would like.
That's crazy.
And they blamed me. They were trying to do this sneaky process. They were going to take, that one office. They were going to take the people. And because we found out and we stopped it, they were upset. And listen, $250, like you just make the guy go away, the whole problem will be gone.
That is, we've done 53 episodes of this podcast. That is the craziest story I've ever heard. I'm not even joking. Like that's insane. So are you with your wife at this point?
The wife that I was with, no, that's my ex-wife.
Okay. Yeah.
Lacey, who's my wife now. So that was part that, to that end, that was very difficult. One, that's a huge strain on a relationship. Number two, we moved back to the States unplanned. So she wasn't planning on coming to the States. She comes to the States, very, very difficult for her. And so that made the relationship. I mean, we were in the United States by force, not by like, we're choosing to do this.
So it's one thing to get your teeth kicked in starting your first business. It's another, like I'm trying to play this through in my own head. If tomorrow a competitor literally came up to us and was like, yeah, we have a hit out for you. Like you kind of got to shut down your business. When you go back to the States and you have to start over again, the thing that we talk about a lot in the show is a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, they get started and they have that like right out of the gate, this excitement. I'm so excited. I'm going to be a millionaire. And it never actually turns out that way. It usually takes a lot of years. How did you process having to start all over? What was that emotionally like? Did you rely on things like spirituality? Did you rely on things like exercise? Like what did you rely on in those points where you lost your identity of this successful entrepreneur in a place that you were so familiar with and having to start anew?
Yeah, I don't even think that and not even just losing my identity. So let's double down on it. So I moved to the States. One other small detail: I was 24 when I graduated from chiropractic college. Again, no disrespect. When you're 24 or younger, you know everything. I was that way. I knew everything. Like you don't need to speak Spanish to move to Costa Rica. The other thing is there's a series of national board exams that a chiropractor needs to take in the United States to become licensed. Well, at 24, I was like, I'm never coming back. So I never took these tests.
Wow.
So now I'm 32. I haven't been in school for 8 years and I need to take these tests. So that was number one. I had to get licensed. I had to go through a series of rigorous tests that I had to study for simply because I hadn't been in school for 8 years. That was number one. Number two, then I'm struggling in the relationship realm because we were forced to move to the States. And my wife at the time, she wasn't adapting very well. Three, we opened up a business, a chiropractic office, and I did it with a partner. And then we're going through a partnership dissolution. So there's a divorce and a partnership dissolution, which is a business divorce, going on all at the same time. So, I mean, this is like the lowest of the low. So one of the things that I love to tell people is listen, this is around like, let's see, that would be 2004. It's not that long ago that I was at dead zero, which is like a lot of entrepreneurs' story, right?
Yeah.
We have a huge appetite for risk. So we have a propensity to potentially lose it all, and a propensity to gain it all back and then lose it all again. And so in that period of time, I mean, yeah, that was a very difficult time. And I would say everything. So everything is what you lean on, right? So, you know, your spirituality becomes important, your own self-worth, the work that you're doing, you know, your self-worth requires self-work. You have to put in the work to, you know, figure out who you are in this world, where you fit in. All of those things became really important to figure out my identity. But I will say this, at the end of the day, I don't feel like my identity's changed. It was just like refinding my center, right? And getting back on track. These things happen. You know, people always say this, it's super cliche that, you know, life is happening not to you, but for you. These things happen. And then you have a choice of whether or not you are going to learn the lessons. You know, in Sanskrit, we're told that life sends us lessons. The lessons will repeat until you learn them. So you have a choice, you know, in the relationship realm to learn lessons, in the business realm to learn lessons. And these things get sent to you, you learn the lesson. And then if you choose to learn the lesson, you don't have to relive that lesson. You can just be a great husband or a great wife. You can be a great entrepreneur. You can be a great steward of your money. You can be great with relationships and collaborations in business, or not. And if you're not, you'll find yourself learning these lessons over and over. Employees are leaving, collaborative partners are stabbing you in the back. But rather than complain about it, you need to stop and say, like, what are the lessons I'm supposed to learn?
What are the common threads? I think most of the time, I think younger entrepreneurs, it's an accountability problem, because like life is happening. When you live in the life is happening to me phase, you're constantly looking at, well, this person did this to me and that person did this to me, and this is why I'm not going to be successful here. When you get to the States, you go through a really rough first year. What is your version of that Today Show in Costa Rica that was your big break back in Indianapolis?
Well, that's interesting. Honestly, it was meeting my today wife, Lacey, who is just a brilliant entrepreneur. That in meeting her, we had that alignment, that energetic alignment. And lucky for me, it was a romantic partner, but it could have been a business partner. But she's also my business partner. So, you know, the 2-for-1 there. And in that, it's almost like she opened my eyes, because I was successful in Costa Rica, but I didn't like understand success until I had met her. I didn't understand what a successful relationship looked like until I met her. I didn't really understand what a successful business looked like until I met her. A partnership, I didn't, you know, obviously going through a partnership dissolution, I just had the wrong person, and I could choose to continue to re-engage that or even try to repair that. Meeting Lacey really helped me to kind of solidify what success looks like. And then it was easy to just live in that repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. So then I always wonder, when you have relationships where you're tied in business as well, what are some of the challenges or things that you've learned having a business partner that's also your significant other?
It's interesting, because I would also say there's, in my experience in coaching and consulting, it's an even bigger challenge when you're not in business together. I think that the number one reason, and I mean, and I'm not, there's no hyperbole here. I think the number one reason why entrepreneurs, if you have a 9-to-5, it might be different. It's not always, but it might be different. But the number one reason why entrepreneurs struggle or ultimately may fail is because they have a significant other who doesn't understand that entrepreneur life, right? Like, if you work 9-to-5, you clock in, you clock out, you make X on your paycheck. I mean, my paycheck is different every month, and it really just depends on how hard I work. And, you know, today I'm here, and if imagine Lacey was like, why are you going over there to talk to these young guys? Like and constantly in my ear, like, what are you doing? Why are you working till 7? And I see that a lot. I see that a ton. hey, you made good money this month. Why are you investing it back in the business? Do you really need more equipment? Do you really need to buy these more things? And you're like, yeah, I need that for the business. If we don't do that, we can't make more money. And I see that friction as being the number one reason why entrepreneurs get stuck or cannot win. So for me, having Lacey in the business actually makes it easier. People ask us, I would say in doing interviews, that's one of the most popular questions. Like, how do you separate? Well, I don't know why I would want to separate. I would separate if I worked a 9 to 5 at Ernst & Young. I was an accountant. I probably don't come home to my wife and start talking to her about taxes and accounting. But because we are in this business together, why would we separate it? Like, it's our life, right? So we're doing business. I'm not saying that we just do business 24/7, but it's the same thing. Like, I don't have to like consciously have this like, oh, hey, we're not talking business. I think that's actually dangerous. Like, if it's 7 o'clock and a client has a question, she understands that I'm going to answer that. Now, sometimes I could be with somebody that's like, why are you answering a client at 7 o'clock? That, I think, is where the friction happens. That's where the destruction of the business happens, because then I start to juggle, hey, I'm trying to, be these two things. I'm this and that. For me, it's super easy because I have just a life. This life includes my kids, this life includes Lacey, and this life includes my business, but it's really just all one thing versus these people who are super compartmentalized. I think that's a challenge.
How do you keep like work problems at work and not bring them home?
We don't. We don't. You can totally have a conversation at home about a work problem. But I will, and maybe this is kind of what the question is. One of the things, though, that one of the ways that we don't allow work problems to bleed into the relationship is that we have very clearly defined roles. And this is something that we figured out very early on. And in our book, we have a book called None of Your Business. We talk literally about this, that for the longest time, Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, is really good because we have a house manager now. But before we had a house manager, I was in charge of the laundry, which that meant that for her, do not touch the laundry. That's mine. She was in charge of cooking and cleaning in the kitchen, which meant don't do that. She paid the bills. So that meant that I never was like, hey, did you pay the cell phone bill? Because it just means if she's in charge of it, she's in charge of it. It's done. So she doesn't come back and say like, hey, did you wash the darks? Like, that's my thing. I've got it. But and then in business, the same way. She's very systems and process oriented. I'm very vision oriented. Inside of our business, there are just things that we do and we trust each other, which allows us to trust each other more because we're actually in a relationship, right? So I'm not like, I wonder if she took care of this thing. If I had a business partner, maybe that, and I would question, like, if I had a business partner, I never would want to think that, but maybe. But because it's Lacey, I would never think like, I wonder if she just neglected this whole aspect of the business and I need to like look over her shoulder and see, or vice versa. She knows there's certain things that I am responsible for in the business, and that just means I'm responsible for it. I'm going to take care of it. We've got it handled. And so once we had roles, and so it actually was taking, like in business, that makes sense. It was taking that and doing that in the home, that then it made crystal clear sense. Who's doing what? We had to agree. And then I wasn't like, it's messed up. I'm always paying the bills. You never pay the bills. Why would we want to do everything half and half? Like, so what? I pay 3 bills, you pay 3 bills? Why don't you just be the bill person? And then I'll just be able to say like, you've got it. Part of it was sitting down and looking at, because I would never want you to be the bill person if you're like, I hate doing the bills. Right? So we have to talk like, do you mind that? And you could say like, I hate it. I'm not very good at it. I keep forgetting. We get late fees. And then I would be like, okay, well, let me do it. Right? So once we gained clarity and literally sat down and figured out who does what, I think that was huge for us to be able to just have everything, not necessarily bringing business problems home, but not bringing any problems across any of the lines that they don't need to be across.
Because there's that anonymity to be able to operate like without the check-in of the other person. The micromanagement aspect of being in business, I think, is really big, because we talk, most of the people that started this business, Gryt, we're all college buddies. And the main reason why we did that, me and my co-founder Jace, we're best friends. We're like brothers. And that idea of not having to turn around, he handles all the finances, all the systems, all the finances. That trust, that family-like trust allows me to do what I do best and him to do what he does best. Most business owners struggle, especially getting out of that like 100K to 300K phase, is handing off projects because there's this idea of I can do it better. How have you worked business owners through that problem?
Super simple. If you think that you are the best at, what are you the best at here in this business?
The creative strategy.
You're the best at creative strategy. So you are 100% the creative strategy. I get 100% production out of you. Here's my argument. Let's go get 2 people that can do 75% of what you can do. And now I have 150% production. I actually can outproduce you with 2 lesser people, right? So just give me 2 75% players. Give me 2 B players, and I'll still be able to outproduce you. And what that will do is allow you to move up to the next thing. Because I'll be like, why are you doing a creative strategy? You should be out gaining the relationships and bringing more business in here. And you're like, well, I can't do that because I have all this creative strategy work. Okay, well, let's just get 2 creative strategy people. And you'll look at them and be like, they're not as good as me. Great, but there's 2 of them. They can each be 75% as good as you. And now I can get 150% production. And now this business has already gained revenue and production just by making that one move. And by the way, those 2 people that we bring in, we don't have to pay them as much as we need to pay you for the 100% that we're getting today, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
Kind of on that same theory, with you franchising, do you find problems like replicating yourself in a franchise, like keeping your standards?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing. And I love that question. In fact, we have an event coming up this weekend for service providers based entirely on culture. And culture is all about upholding standards. I love Mike Tomlin, head football coach at the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the Steelers locker room, it says the standard is the standard. There's just a way that we do it. I don't find it hard to uphold standards. One, if you have standards and you have accountability, which you were speaking about earlier. If you have accountability, it's actually not the leader's job to uphold the standards. Once there's a standard, it's the team's job, right? So amongst us, we're sitting here and, I'm late. It's not on the owner because the owner might not even know. It's on you guys when I came late to be like, dude, that's not how we do it here, right? We always are on time. And so by you coming late, you made us to wait. And now internally, the standard gets upheld, right? And so the whole thing is, one, I think a lot of people that complain about standards, we ask them like, well, what is the culture? Like literally, we sit down and define the culture. A lot of people that say like, I have a hard time finding good people. Like, okay, well, there's a lot of people. You're saying they're not good. Well, because they don't fit. Okay, well, what's the culture? What is the culture? Like, yeah, it's loose. We love to party, but then when we snap twice, we all work hard. It doesn't matter. There's no wrong way to do it. What is the culture? One of the things too, I will say though, to entrepreneurs is that the culture needs to be set up around the principle. And people, I always tell people, if you are the business owner, the world revolves around you. So even this morning, as an example, and you guys, it's not because of the viral Ashton guy. It's not because of that. I always have 2 things, Guru energy drink and Saratoga water. So this morning when Gabe came by to pick me up, he literally texted me, don't forget to bring your Guru. Well, I already had a Saratoga in my hand, but that's part of the culture, right? And he just knows like, hey, Shawn's leaving. Make sure you have your Saratoga and your Guru. That just gets set because that's what I like to drink. So if Gabe was like, this is nonsense, let's just do Coke Zero, I'd be like, hey, that's not what I drink, right? So the culture gets set up around. Now, interestingly, Gabe loves Guru. He's like, I love this stuff. Right? So the culture begins to then bleed out into the people. So it starts with you just asking yourself first, what do I need around me in my environment to do my best work? Do I need everybody to be like, on time, all wearing a certain thing? No, I don't need that. Okay, well then that's not part of the culture. What do you need? And then the team holds the team accountable for instituting these things.
So then do you find it easier for whether it be franchisees or just employees to hire someone with no experience and train them your way, or to hire someone that's been in the business for a while?
I think it depends on what the job role is. Even in your guys' realm, I think almost everything can be learned. There's YouTube. And so I would just rather have the right fit, the guy or girl that comes in and they just fit in. And then we're doing whatever, we're editing videos and we use this platform. Even that, like you guys in editing, someone could come in here and be like, I don't use whatever platform you're using. And as long as they were like, but I could learn it. Like I understand editing. I just don't understand the platform. And he's like, watch YouTube videos. But as long as they're a good fit, because if they knew how to use my platform, but they didn't fit us, and I was like, this guy's like driving me crazy, that's worse, right? So I always say this, hire people, not roles. And people do the reverse. People always put out ads where they're like, they would say like, we need a new creative director. I'm like, what is that? Like we need a new person, bring them in, and then let's train them up on the culture, and then let's start to fit them into creative director. Hire the right person. They can learn editing. So if I get the right person and I'm like, we have a need in editing, then let's train them up and get them on editing. I don't need to hire an editor, but that's what people do. They say, I need a new editor. And that's how you end up with an editor who doesn't fit because you hired an editor. I just want to hire the right people on the team. Then we figure out where they're going to sit on this bus.
I feel like it definitely creates, like if you let people kind of choose what they want to do and kind of work up into that role, I feel like you get way better work, more efficiency, they work harder. So definitely.
Well, we literally do that every year. At the end of the year, I have every single one of our team members makes a presentation to the entire team where they explain to everybody what it is they do. It's a fascinating exercise because they say like, hey, this is what I do. One, me as the owner, I'm oftentimes like, oh, I didn't even know that you were doing that, right? Like it's interesting. Two, everybody else knows then. So you're like, oh, I'm in this section, but if I ever need, I didn't know that I would go to you for that. I thought you just were doing creative. No, I also am publishing the podcast. Like, that's strange. Why do you do that? I thought, and so now people get that clarity. And then I have them pick a title. So every year they refresh their title. So they decide, they tell me, I don't care what their title is. So they tell me like, well, looking at what I do, I think I'm basically the director of sales. Okay, that's interesting. Welcome as the new director of sales for the next year. You are the director of sales. And what's interesting too is there's a lot of ownership in that. If I said I was the director of sales, I can't tomorrow be like, I don't do sales or I'm not responsible for sales numbers. Like you said you were in charge of this. And the other thing is then we get interesting. I had somebody tell me that they were the swing man. They were the Robert Horry of the team. They just came in and they could play any position. They were the point guard, the two guard. They could play forward. They were like, put me in any position. I just come on the court and I cover for whatever we need at the time. Well, what an interesting job title, right? Like I've just, I cover every base.
Well, if that's the case, then how do you hold accountability?
So one, we do regular meetings once a week. We do twice a week. We do meetings. On Mondays, we do a meeting that is based off of David Meltzer's Student of the Calendar. We're obsessed with time. So the entire team is on calendar and we know what everybody's doing and we're just obsessed with efficiencies. Like we don't get trapped. We have a very small team. When people look at what we do and then look at our team, it's a very small team. Our revenue per employee is outrageous. We're a very small, lean, efficient, effective team. And in the second meeting we do, I stole from Elon Musk. On Wednesdays, we do project review. So I will pick something, an element of the business, and then the people who are in charge of it will present and we will review because they may need help from other members of the team. Then we utilize ClickUp. So we have very few sort of basis of what we do, but we tell our team the way that they get bonuses by being a student of their calendar, by being effective and efficient, by logging everything they do in ClickUp. It's not an endorsement for ClickUp, any task management thing that you utilize. In today's world, my team is spread out. Gabe is the only local to Naples. My other assistant's in Portland, Oregon. What's great is when Gabe clocks out at 6 p.m., I still get 3 more hours out of Portland, right?
Very
so
cool.
My day can be extended. Everything they put in ClickUp allows us as leaders to know what's processing. So I tell them, if you didn't put it in ClickUp, I don't know that you did it. So my assumption is you did nothing, right? So they just log, what they're doing through ClickUp. not lying to themselves. For every business owner, every employee is going to lie to you. But what I want them, in order to lie to me, first they have to lie to themselves. And I want them just to be super honest. Everything doesn't get done on time. We screw up. Just say like, oh man, I was trying to get that done, but then I started playing this video game or whatever happened. Like just say like that's what happened, is then that creates that accountability. And then our last one is be on time for everything. If we do those 4 things consistently as a team, we'll make a lot of money, right? And so it's not picking like get new clients, or it's just do these behaviors consistently as a team, and we'll all, because we bonus like crazy, we'll all make a ton of money if we will all commit to these 4 behaviors.
So that's super interesting. We just got back from our quarterly retreat that we literally came back from yesterday. And it's so interesting being in the position that I'm in. When you look at the business growth, we've grown totally based on referral, word of mouth, podcasting, all the different media things that we've done. But there's sometimes when you look at the unexplainable growth of your company. And when we had our quarterly review, most like in previous reviews, it's like, let's get more clients. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it's all based on outcome-based things. This was the first time where we really sat down and we were like, let's focus on the activities. It was one of the ones that we literally talked about was time. Another one was culture. We're going through a transition where a bunch of college buddies started this thing. Now all of a sudden it has traction. Now all of a sudden we have competitors that if they wanted to put out a hit on us, they probably would. We have these different things that, again, we didn't know, like we weren't expecting that specifically. And we had to talk about corporatizing, like, and becoming a more corporate company, because we're just homies shooting the shit, having a good time, but that doesn't work to get to that next level. So we were talking about that. Do you think it's necessary at a certain point, if you are in more of a lax kind of environment, to corporatize, to kind of not censor yourself, but limit, this is who I am in office, this is who I am out of office? Or do you think those two should play together?
I think they should play together. But I think that corporatize kind of has like I wouldn't use the word corporatize.
As a negative stigma.
Yeah, as a negative stigma.
Yeah.
But I do think that probably listening to that, what we're crossing this bridge is a great book. It's called Predictable Success by Les McEwen. And what happens is he studied hundreds of businesses, and he found that the successful businesses all followed a very similar story arc. What happens is, and it's interesting because you have you and a college buddy. All successful businesses require two roles. The initial 2 roles are visionary and operator. So one of you is more vision oriented. One of you is more, put it together and operate. What happens is, and this is what you're literally explaining this, as we grow, we encounter a moment, maybe like this past weekend, where we realize we need to be a little more systematized. Here's the problem. The visionary hates systems. The visionary is like, why would we do that?
Yes, I do.
Because what's going to happen is it's going to handcuff me. It's going to stifle me. But the visionary also understands that they're important. The visionary is like, we need systems for those people, right? So these people have got to get on a system, but you can't handcuff me to that, because then we're going to lose our edge. I come in at 10, but these people, they got to be there. They got to be there at 9, right? Then what happens is, and the operator, interestingly, is the same way. People would think that the operator is like, I love systems, and they also love systems for other people. But the way that you got here is that the operator did a lot of things their way. Their sort of back room, put it together on the fly way. And that's what stifles growth, because now we bring other people in that literally are looking at the operator and they're like, I don't even understand how you're doing this, right? Like there's some like convoluted spreadsheet. I'm running it all off this thing, like something that nobody understands, right? Like, and they're like, I don't understand what is. That's then that gap. So then they make this interesting decision. And I think it kind of fits with this corporatizing. They decide that they need more processes, and usually they enter in a third person. So a third person comes in. You might call him like the COO. That's bring in
crazy.
They bring in
crazy.
all
You're
of these
calling
processes,
this like a book right now,
right? So they're like, hey, listen, my job is to come in and I make all the rules, right? So we start to put all these things in place. And this actually kind of works, right? It gets you to the next level. But the danger is that the visionary and the COO get really bored of this. There's like, his name is escaping me. Shawn is his name. Napster guy.
I know who you're talking about.
He's the stereotypical visionary.
Yeah.
Starts Napster, bounces. He was a president of Facebook. Like every time it starts to get over processed, he can't handle it. He's like, I'm out of here. That is almost that's the story arc of every successful business. And eventually the founders, they leave. And this starts a slow downturn, right? Because now we've lost that culture, that edge. And so there's this interesting thing where we're constantly trying to work, which again, back to coaches and mentorship. It's natural. That is the natural thought process. You need coaches and mentorship to help to say, like, listen, as we're building this, I understand we need systems and processes, but do we need to bring in Mr. Processor here that's cracking the whip on everybody? How do we get to that point? And then in the book, Les McEwen talks about whitewater. So what happens is, and this probably sounds like based off of your meeting is the next step, is you are choosing to navigate this business into whitewater, turbulent water, because you're like, look, we're doing well. We look across at the other side. It's better. And there's white water just ripping across in front of us, but we're going to have to endure this to get over there. When you get in that white water, it's so rocky and so bumpy, then you face a very interesting decision, because then leadership could say, and the entire team could say, let's go back. Was it that bad when we were doing 100K a month? Not that bad. Like, why are we doing all of this to try and get to 200K? Let's just go back to 100K. We don't need Mr. Processor. Let's just go back. It was fine like that. Or the team is like, this sucks, but we get across, right? And so you push through. And again, coaching and mentorship helps you to understand, because otherwise you're just in it and it's happening to you and you're like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. And you follow these patterns that, again, have played out in the past. Like, oh, I know when the defense does this, you should do that. Someone else could help you because they're objectively reading the situation, and you're like, oh, okay, I got it. That makes sense. In every business, that's why I love predictable success. Every successful business goes through this. It's just the natural iteration.
Yeah, you nailed that. That's exactly what's happening. What you were saying right before that about how you built your company lean and efficient with your revenue per employee. When you're looking at that, do you think it's better to have less employees that wear multiple hats?
Yes.
That help each other, or separated?
No. Everybody in my team is cross-trained on every other thing.
Yeah.
So, James Lewis is our podcast producer and content capture guy. He's the best at it on our team. But Gabe can do it. So Gabe is here. So Gabe is capturing content. Everybody on my team needs to know how to capture content. So that just comes down to their simple SOPs on how to do everything that are logged. And if you don't know how to do it, you can bring up the SOP and follow it. Now, it'll get done. Will it be great? No, because someone else is better at it, right? And that's who holds that role. But if that someone else is not there, it needs to be able to be done. And that also, by the way, includes leadership. I can't tell you how many people that I have coached, small business owners, that they are the only one that knows how to do payroll. And I'm like, well, what happens if one day, like, let's say, God forbid, something happened to you and you were in the hospital. So like now nobody gets paid? Like there's no SOP on this? There's no like second person that's like, hey, when that happens, I step in. Like there are so many things in leadership. Because of this, I'm the only one that can do it.
Yeah.
That only leadership can do, which are key things that if leadership wasn't there, it would impact the entire business. Like nobody knows how to do this. And we create redundancy on the small things like podcast production. Like, well, everyone knows how to push the podcast to the platform. Okay, but not everybody knows how to do payroll. It doesn't mean that they have the keys and the passwords to do it, but they could if we needed to do that, right? And everybody needs to know where we're banking, right? What happens if the key person's not there and we're like, we don't even know where any of this stuff is. We don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to activate the Stripe account. I don't know how to do anything. Like, so that I think is critical. One other critical thing is one of the rules on our team is everybody sells. Everybody sells. Everyone needs to, and I say this everywhere. We do sales trainings. I always tell people, if somebody talks to people, they must be trained on sales, because I full well know that someone might create a relationship with my assistant and go to Gabe and be like, hey, what is it like to work with Shawn? And Gabe cannot say, oh, I don't do that. you got to talk to Joe on the team. He does sales.
Yeah.
Because that's friction to transact. Why do I got to talk to this other guy? Gabe's got to be like, dude, let me get you hooked up. I can get this done right now. Anytime anybody's like, hey, how do I engage you? I want to do some ads. Like, can you hook me up? And if you're like, oh no, I don't do sales on ads. That's someone else on the team. That's a lost opportunity. Everyone on the team needs to be like, oh, you want to run ads with us? Yeah. Pull out their phone. I'm going to sign you up right now. Let me tell you what it looks like. Let me tell you how it operates. Do you want to get started now? They need to have that training, obviously, to know how to sell. And they need to have the capacity, the tools to be able to book the business right then. And anybody, if I just think to myself, would this person ever potentially talk to a prospect? If the answer is yes, they have to be trained and they have to know how to sell.
That's incredible advice. I hope everybody's actually like listening, taking notes during this, because I know we're learning a ton. I want to pivot the conversation to talk about your network because it is sick. Obviously, I see you're really close with Michael Chandler. That's super cool. How did you build your network in the way that you have?
I love to talk about this because I hope that this inspires a lot of people because I am an introvert. So first of all, everybody's like, well, you're an extrovert, easy. No, I am. And you guys do a lot of stuff in Naples. You've never seen me at influencer party things.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to that stuff. It's not my thing. Like if I was invited and there was a really good reason, so I'm not saying like I wouldn't go, but I'm not sitting at home thinking like, hey man, I've never been to the Perry Hotel in Naples. Like, so I'm not like, how do I get to the Perry? In fact, the owner of the Perry Hotel lives in my neighborhood. But I'm not like, hey, how do I go? Because like I looked at it this weekend. There's all these people. I was like, oh, there's a lot of people at that thing. Like, that's the last thing that I want to do. But what I realized, especially right when COVID came, we were very fortunate because of relationships. We had a lot of advance notice on COVID, which also tells you if anybody thinks that it was like this accidental thing, there were people that were telling others, myself included, like, listen, this is a really bad thing. This is going to happen. Way out in advance. And I started telling the clients that I serve. The interesting thing is my clients were like, what are you even talking about? Literally telling me I'm never going to close. I don't care if they tell me we have to close. I'm not going to close. I was like, no, this is really serious. They're going to close you. And they're like, I'm never closing. And then, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, they were being forced to close and they were like, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, we should have been prepping this the last 4 weeks. So we had your business ready. And in that period of time, I realized the economy was going to suffer. And I also realized that the way out was relationships. I literally started, in all of my content pre-COVID, I was telling people relationship capital will be the currency that will revive your business. And so I started to push into relationships. And COVID did something really interesting, is that it moved podcasting away from this because we couldn't be in person. And it made everything go to virtual. Now, super props. I love that you do your podcast in person. We only do our podcast in person. We film out of SoFi or out of Las Vegas. We do it in person, which that's not very convenient living in Naples, right? So we film out of SoFi in LA or Las Vegas and only in person. A lot of big names will be like, can we do it virtual? And I would love to have that name on my podcast. And we tell them no, because this is different. But back then it opened up that realm of like, we can do these things virtually. So I realized like, listen, I have to begin to accumulate relationship capital. And so I just literally started to 1, study, 2, understand, and 3, apply. Then the game of relationships, understanding how to provide value to other people, realizing that, and I talked to Gabe a lot about this, that we're all just human beings. I am not better than either one of you. You guys are not better than me. We're not better than the people that we have on our teams. Everybody needs something. When people throw out a name like Michael Chandler would love to be in the entrepreneurial space. He's just really good at inflicting pain on other individuals. There's tons of things that I've done with Michael. I have some really endearing and touching clips where like Michael literally is saying like, I look up to Shawn as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. I'm like, well, I look up to you as a physical specimen. I don't look like that. If I take my shirt off and Michael takes his shirt off, like Michael's a machine, right? So we all have different things that, other people are looking up to us for. And then we realize that the greatest gift that we can give is not that I share my gifts, but I share your gifts. So if I could connect you to other people, right? So if you have something that would help a Michael Chandler or a David Meltzer or a Clinton Sparks or whoever it is, just this weekend, I found myself, there was a young man that was like, I want to become a music artist. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. And he was like, okay. And he was telling me his story. And then he was like, I need to find a feature. Because, he's trying to create his first album. He's, I want to do a feature. And he's done very well for himself economically. He's like, I have $100,000 budget. Do you think I could get Justin Bieber? And I was like, I laughed because I was like, I don't think so. And he's like, well, like, could you help me? People in the music space. I end up talking to a friend and I was like, I know nothing about this. This is a weird thing, but I have $100,000 budget and I'm looking for a feature. And that friend was like, what's really strange is that I was just told today that I have 2 songs that are for sale. One's with French Montana and one's with Chris Brown. And I was like, oh. And so I was like, well, let's have a conversation. And so I end up brokering a Chris Brown feature, which literally sitting here, I couldn't name a Chris Brown song. I just know he's like really famous. Like he's got a gazillion followers on Instagram. So I end up brokering a Chris Brown feature because of relationship capital. I'm not a music, and I'm even telling my other friend in the music industry, I don't even know how this works. All I can do is get you the money and it can transfer through me to you. And then is there a contract? What if the songs, I don't know. Yeah. But that's all relationship capital is taking your gifts and finding a match for someone else.
I'd be interested on the Michael Chandler thing. What have you learned from a guy like that who's just a straight up warrior? And what in turn do you think he's learned from you?
Oh, that's interesting. I've spent a lot of time with Michael, and he is a huge inspiration for me because it's a switch that obviously turns on when he steps in the cage. UFC 314 coming up in Miami. We'll be there. Michael's going to whoop up on Patty Pimblett. Super
That's
excited about
sick fight.
that. Michael is the nicest, like literally, I'm not exaggerating, the nicest human being that you could ever meet. The most giving man, the most incredible father, the most devout spiritual Christian. I mean, just the nicest man that you can meet. Hardworking, just absolutely dedicated to his craft. And one of the things that Michael says all the time is keep the promises that you make to yourself. When you wake up every day and you're in his shoes and you've got to train, and I did some content on this. You got to eat that same. He posts that Mega Fit meals. It's that same beef and broccoli every day. It's keeping promises to yourself, right? It's that dedication on his recovery, on his workouts, on his training. All of that is what then culminates then in this man that gets in the cage and fights for a living and inflicts pain on other human beings, and then steps out of that cage and turns around and becomes the greatest father because he keeps those promises that he made to himself. He trains 5 days a week. He goes back to Nashville. He trains here in Florida. He goes back to Nashville on the weekends to be a good husband and a good father. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. What I know that he has learned from me is to ask. When you are someone that's in his shoes, it's easy for others, us included, all of us, to think like that. He's got it made. Like he has everything in life. And then it makes it hard for him when he looks at you guys and he's like, hey, I saw your podcast and you were with Shawn. He might look at that and be like, I want to go on that podcast. But then he's like, I'm Michael Chandler. How weird is that? And I'm like, just ask them. If you want to, ask them. Ask for things, and it's difficult, but I feel like that's something that he and I talk about a lot. And I know that once he gets to where he's just asking, the world is just going to open up for him, right? I'm super excited. I know it's tough as a fighter. He loves that. I always tell him, I've asked him, are you a fighter who's trying to become an entrepreneur, or are you an entrepreneur who happens to fight? Because if you're a fighter who's trying to become an entrepreneur, that's not that interesting to me because I'm not trying to collect fighter friends. If you're an entrepreneur who's like, dude, but I'm really good at hitting these guys in the face, that's different because now you have a future. And so I'm really excited about his entrepreneur future. I've been to his last 3 fights. So I go to the fights. It's a really difficult thing to see, by the way, when you actually, because I told him, like, I've always been a UFC fan. I watch anybody else fight, 2 people fight, one guy or gal loses, and then you watch the next one. When Michael loses, I'm like, I'm like devastated. Like I can't watch the next fight because you don't like to see, even if he wins, you don't want to see someone be in a fight. It's really weird. It's the most bizarre. I can't even imagine being direct family and watching that. But I'm super excited because we're not going to have that issue in Miami. I think it's going to be a very short fight.
I think so too.
And I think
he's going to get
Patty is going to be asleep very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a knockout waiting to happen. I don't think Patty has the striking that Mike has. But thank you so much for coming on. This was seriously an incredible podcast. We learned a ton. How can people support you?
Well, biggest way that they can support me is by following us on social media and sharing our content. The biggest gift that you can give us is sharing the content out to other people. Even if you are not a service provider and you're watching this, you know service providers. So the greatest gift that you could give us is just put some, if you found any of these clips interesting, put it on your social media, share it with your friends, allow us to connect with more individuals.
Thank you so much for coming on. If you guys enjoyed, please be sure to like, subscribe, share this with another service provider that you believe would find value from it. And we'll see you guys on the next one.